Baruch chapter 4. She is the book of the commandments of God and the law that endures forever. All who hold her fast will live, and those who forsake her will die. Turn, O Jacob, and take her. Walk toward the shining of her light. Do not give your glory to another, or your advantage to an alien people. Happy are we, O Israel, for we know what is pleasing to God. Encouragement for Israel. Take courage, my people, O memorial of Israel. It was not for destruction that you were sold to the nations, but you were handed over to your enemies, because you angered God, for you provoked him who made you by sacrificing to demons and not to God. You forgot the everlasting God who brought you up, and you grieved Jerusalem who reared you. For she saw the wrath that came upon you from God, and she said, Hearken, you neighbors of Zion. God has brought great sorrow upon me, for I have seen the captivity of my sons and daughters, which the everlasting brought upon them. With joy I nurtured them, but I sent them away with weeping and sorrow. Let no one rejoice over me, a widow and bereaved of many. I was left desolate because of the sin of my children, because they turned away from the law of God. They had no regard for his statutes. They did not walk in the ways of God's commandments, nor tread the paths of discipline in his righteousness. Let the neighbors of Zion came remember the capture of my sons and daughters, which the everlasting brought upon them. For he brought against them a nation from afar, a shameless nation of a strange language, who had no respect for an old man, and had no pity for a child. They led away the widow's beloved sons, and bereaved the lonely women of her daughters. But I, how can I help you? For he who brought these calamities upon you will deliver you from the hand of your enemies. Go, my children, go, for I have been left desolate. I have taken off the robe of peace and put on the sackcloth of my supplication. I will cry to the everlasting all my days. Take courage, my children, cry to God, and he will deliver you from the power and hand of the enemy. For I have put my hope in the everlasting to save you, and joy has come to me from the Holy One, because of the mercy which soon will come to you from your everlasting Saviour. For I sent you out with sorrow and weeping, but God will give you back to me with joy and gladness forever. For as the neighbors of Zion have now seen your capture, so they soon will see your salvation by God, which will come to you with great glory, and with the splendor of the everlasting. My children, endure with patience the wrath that has come upon you from God. Your enemy has overtaken you, but you will soon see their destruction, and will tread upon their necks. My tender sons have travelled rough roads. They were taken away like a flock carried away by the enemy. Take courage, my children, and cry to God, for you will be remembered by him who brought this upon you. For just as you purpose to go astray from God, return with tenfold zeal to seek them. For he who brought these calamities upon you will bring you everlasting joy with your salvation. Jerusalem is assured of help. Take courage, O Jerusalem, for he who named you will comfort you. Wretched will those who afflict you, and rejoice at your fall. Wretched will be the cities which your children served as slaves. Wretched will be the city which rejoiced your sons. For just as she rejoiced at your fall, and was glad for your ruin, so she will be grieved at her own desolation. And I will take away her pride in her great population, and her insolence will be turned to grief. For fire will come upon her from the everlasting for many days, and for a long time she will be inhabited by demons. Look forward the east, O Jerusalem, and see the joy that is coming to you from God. Behold, your sons are coming, whom you sent away. They are coming, gathered from east and west. at the words of the Holy One, rejoicing in the glory of God. Baruch chapter 5. Take off the garment of your sorrow and affliction, O Jerusalem, and put on forever the beauty of the glory from God. Put on the robes of righteousness from God. Put on your head the diadem of the glory of the everlasting. For God will show your splendor everywhere under heaven. For your name will ever be called by your God. Peace of righteousness and glory of godliness. Arise, O Jerusalem, stand upon the height, and look towards the east, and see your children gathered from west and east, at the word of the Holy One, rejoicing that God has remembered them. For they went forth from you on foot, led away by their enemies, but God will bring them back to you, carried in glory, as on a royal throne. For God has ordered that every high mountain and the everlasting hills be made low, and the valleys filled up to make level ground, so that Israel may walk safely in the glory of God. The woods and every fragrant trees have shaded Israel at God's command. For God will lead Israel with joy in the light of His glory, with the mercy and righteousness that come from Him. Baruch chapter 6. The letter of Jeremiah. A copy of a letter which Jeremiah sent to those who were to be taken to Babylon as captives by the king of the Babylonians, to give them the message which God had commanded them. The people face a long captivity. Because of the sins which you have committed before God, you will be taken to Babylon as captives by Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Babylonians. Therefore, when you have come to Babylon, you will remain there for many years, for a long time, up to 7 generations. After that, I will bring you away from there in peace. Now in Babylon, you will see gods made of silver and gold and wood, which are carried on men's shoulders and inspire fear in the heathen. So take care not to become at all like foreigners, or to let fear for these gods possess you when you see the multitude before and behind them worshipping them. But say in your heart, it is thou, O Lord, whom we must worship. For my angel is with you, and he is watching your lives. The helplessness of idols. Their tongues are smoothed by the craftsmen, and they themselves are overlaid with gold and silver, but they are false and cannot speak. People take gold and make crowns for the heads of their gods, as they would for a girl who loves ornaments. And sometimes the priests secretly take gold and silver from their gods and spend it upon themselves, and even give some of it to the harlots in the brothel. They deck their gods out with garments like men, these gods of silver and gold and wood, which cannot save themselves from rust and corrosion. When they have been dressed in purple robes, their faces are wiped because of the dust from the temples, which is thick upon them. Like a local ruler, the god holds a scepter, though unable to destroy anyone who offends it. It has a dagger in its right hand and has an axe, but it cannot save itself from war and robbers. Therefore, they evidently are not gods, so do not fear them. For just as one's dish is useless when it is broken, so are the gods of the heathen when they have been set up in the temples. Their eyes are full of the dust raised by the feet of those who enter. And just as the gates are shut on every side upon a man who has offended a king, as though he was sentenced to death, so the priests make their temples secure with doors and locks and bars, in order that they may not be plundered by robbers. They light lamp even more than they light for themselves. Though their gods can see none of them, they are just like a beam of the temple. But men say their hearts have melted when worms from the earth devour them and their robes. They do not notice when their faces have been blackened by the smoke of the temple. Bats, swallows, and birds light on their bodies and heads, and so do cats. From this you will know that they are not gods, so do not fear them. As for the gold which they wear for beauty, they will not shine unless someone wipes off the dust For even when they were being cast, they had no feeling. They are brought at any cost, but there is no breath in them. Having no feet, they are carried on men's shoulders, revealing to mankind their worthlessness. And those who serve them are ashamed, because through them these gods are made to stand, lest they fall to the ground. If anyone sets one of them upright, it cannot move itself, and if it is tipped over, it cannot straighten itself. But gifts are placed before them, just as before the dead. The priests sell the sacrifices that are offered to these gods, and use the money, and likewise their wives preserve some salt, but give none to the poor or helpless. Sacrifices to them may be touched by women in menstruation or at childbirth. Since you know by these things they are not gods, do not fear them. For why should they be called gods? Women serve meals for gods of silver, and gold and wood, and in their temples the priests sit with their clothes rent, their heads and beards shaved, and their heads uncovered. They howl and shout before their gods, as some do at a funeral feast for a man who has died. The priests take some of the clothing of their gods to clothe their wives and children. Whether one does evil to them or good, they will not be able to repay it. They cannot set up a king or depose one. Likewise, they are not able to give either wealth or money. If one makes a vow to them and does not keep it, they will not require it. They cannot save a man from death or rescue the weak from the strong. They cannot restore sight to a blind man. They cannot rescue a man who is in distress. They cannot take pity on a widow or do good to an orphan. These things that are made of wood and overlaid with gold and silver are like stones from the mountain, and those who serve them will be put to shame. Why then must anyone think that they are gods or call them gods? The foolishness of worshipping idols. Besides, even the Chaldeans themselves dishonor them. For when they see a dumb man who cannot speak, they bring him and pray Bel, that the man who speak as though Bel were unable to understand. Yet they themselves cannot perceive this and abandon them, for they have no sense. And the women with cords about them sit along the passageways, burning bran for incense, and when one of them is led off by one of the passers-by and is lain with, she derides the women next to her, because she was not as attractive as herself, and her cord was not broken. Whatever is done for them is false. Why then must anyone think that they are gods or call them gods? They are made by carpenters and goldsmiths, and they can be nothing but what the craftsmen wish them to be. The men that make them will certainly not live very long themselves. How then can the things that are made by them be gods? They have left only lies and reproach for those who came after. For when war or calamity comes upon them, the priests consult together as to where they can hide themselves and their gods. How then can one fail to see that these are not gods, for they cannot save themselves from war or calamity? Since they are made of wood and overlaid with gold and silver, it will afterward be known that they are false. It will be manifest to all the nations and kings that they are not gods, but the work of man's hands, and that there is no work of God in them. Who then can fail to know that they are not gods? For they cannot set up a king over a country or give rein to men. They cannot judge their own cause or deliver one who is wronged, for they have no power. They are like crows between heaven and earth. When fire breaks out in a temple of wooden gods, overlaid with gold and silver, their priests will flee and escape, but the gods will be burnt in two like beams. Besides, they can offer no resistance to a king or any enemies. Why then must anyone admit or think that they are gods? Gods made of wood and overlaid with silver and gold are not able to save themselves from thieves and robbers. Strong men will strip them of their gold and silver and of the robes they wear, and go off with his booty, and they will not be able to help themselves. So it is better to be a king who shows his courage, or a household, a utensil that serves its owner's needs, than to be these false gods. Better even the door of a house that protects its content than these false gods. Better also a wooden pillar in a palace than these false gods. For sun, moon, and stars, shining and sent forth for service, are obedient. So also the lightning, when it flashes, is widely seen, and the wind likewise blows in every land. When God commands clouds to go over the whole world, they carry out his command, and the fire sent from above to consume mountains and woods does what it is ordered. But these idols are not to be compared with them in appearance or power. Therefore, one must not think that they are gods nor call them gods, for they are not able to either to decide a case or to do good to men. Since you know then that they are not gods, do not fear them, for they can neither curse nor bless kings. They cannot show signs in the heavens and among the nations, or shine like the sun, or give light like the moon. The wild beasts are better than they are, for they can flee to cover and help themselves. So we have no evidence whatever that they are gods, therefore do not fear them. Like a scarecrow in a cucumber bed that guards them nothing, so are their gods of wood overlaid with gold and silver. In the same way, their gods of wood overlaid with gold and silver are like a thorn bush in a garden, on which every bird sits, or like a dead body cast out in the darkness. But the purple and linen that wrought upon them, you will know that they are not gods, and that they will finally themselves be consumed and be a reproach in the land. Better, therefore, is a just man who has no idols, for he will be far from reproach.